You know what I'm saying?
You know how hard it is.
Some people say, I want to go play baseball.
You think it's funny?
Right?
Yeah. And then I want to come back. Well, some people say, I'm going to go 22 straight. And, you know what I'm saying? So it's a contract I feel like you got to have with yourself, too, in order for you to be a, you know, great ball player or to have a long career. That's the goal, to be in the league for 20 years. That's the goal.
But that wasn't the goal.
I want to go on the court.
Charles Barkley just crossed a line that LeBron James and James Harden never saw coming. The NBA legend didn't hold back when he called out today's superstars for disrespecting the players who built this league. What started as casual trash talk has exploded into a full-blown war between generations, and the comments Barkley made have left fans completely divided. LeBron's response? Let's just say he's not backing down. This isn't just another hot take. This is personal, and the fallout is shaking the entire basketball world. It all began innocently enough, or at least that's what LeBron and James Harden probably thought. During a recent conversation in early 2025, both superstars were discussing the evolution of basketball, and naturally, comparisons to previous eras came up. But what they said next sent shockwaves through the basketball community. LeBron, never one to shy away from bold statements, suggested that the game has evolved so dramatically that many legends from past decades wouldn't be able to keep up with today's pace and skill level. He pointed to the athleticism, the three-point shooting, the defensive schemes, basically everything that makes modern basketball what it is. His argument? The game is just different now, and players today are operating at a level that previous generations simply didn't reach. James Harden echoed these sentiments, going even further by implying that the rule changes have made the game more difficult. According to Harden, players from the 80s and 90s had it easier because hand checking was allowed and the game was more physical, which actually made it simpler. In his view, today's players have to navigate complex defensive schemes, elite athleticism, and spacing that didn't exist back then. On the surface, these comments might seem like typical NBA discourse. Players compare eras all the time, right? But here's where it gets problematic. The way these statements were delivered came across as dismissive. It wasn't just about saying the game has changed. It felt like they were saying the old guard wasn't really that great to begin with. Social media erupted immediately. Fans of the older generation felt personally attacked. These weren't just random players being discussed. These were the legends who built the NBA into what it is today. We're talking about players who competed in an era where every night was a battle, where you couldn't just coast through regular season games, where toughness and heart meant everything. The comments section on every basketball platform became a war zone. Older fans fired back, pointing out that players like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and yes, Charles Barkley dominated their era against incredible competition. They argued that these legends would adapt to any era because greatness transcends time periods. But the younger generation defended LeBron and Harden. They brought up statistics, advanced analytics, shooting percentages, and all the data that supposedly proves modern players are superior. The debate was getting heated, and everyone knew it was only a matter of time before someone from the old guard responded. That someone was Charles Barkley. And when Chuck speaks, people listen.
Charles Barkley has never been known for holding his tongue. The Hall of Famer and TNT analyst has built a second career on saying exactly what's on his mind. Consequences be damned. So when he caught wind of what LeBron and Harden were saying about past players, he knew he had to address it. During a broadcast in late January 2025, Barkley went off. And I mean, he completely let loose. He didn't dance around the subject or try to be diplomatic. He called out LeBron and Harden directly for what he called a complete lack of respect for the people who made it possible for them to earn these massive contracts and enjoy this lifestyle. Barkley's main point was simple but devastating. You don't get to mock the foundation while standing on top of it. He reminded everyone that the players from his era played in a completely different environment. There was no load management, no resting for regular season games, no social media to build your brand during the offseason. You showed up, you played hard every single night, and you earned your respect through blood, sweat, and tears. But Chuck didn't stop there. He brought up specific examples of the physicality and competition level from his playing days. He talked about going up against players who would literally try to hurt you if you drove to the basket. He mentioned the mental toughness required to perform at the highest level without the modern amenities that today's players enjoy. The advanced training facilities, the sports science, the nutrition programs, all of it. What really struck a nerve was when Barkley questioned whether LeBron and Harden would have survived in that era. He wasn't saying they weren't great players. He was saying that their greatness came in a softer, more protective environment. And that's a shot that's hard to come back from. The basketball world went absolutely insane. This wasn't some random media personality stirring up drama for clicks. This was Charles Barkley, an 11-time All-Star, a former MVP, and one of the most respected voices in basketball history. When Chuck says something, it carries weight. Other legends started chiming in too. Players from the 80s and 90s who had stayed quiet suddenly felt empowered to speak up. The message was unanimous. Today's players need to show more respect for the history of the game. You can talk about evolution and improvement all you want, but you can't dismiss the greatness that came before you. The generational divide was now a full-blown war, and everyone was picking sides. Chapter 3. LeBron and Harden double down. Now, here's where things get really interesting. LeBron James is not someone who backs down from controversy. He's built a career on being unapologetically himself, and that includes standing by his opinions even when they're unpopular. So when Barkley came at him, LeBron didn't retreat. He doubled down. In a subtle but pointed response during a press conference, LeBron addressed the criticism without directly naming Barkley. He talked about how every generation thinks their era was the toughest, the most competitive, the most real. He suggested that nostalgia clouds judgment and that people tend to romanticize the past while ignoring the advancements and improvements that make the modern game superior. LeBron's argument was actually pretty sophisticated. He acknowledged that past players were great for their time, but he maintained that the overall level of competition today is higher. He pointed to the global nature of modern basketball, the fact that players from all over the world are now competing at the highest level, and the way the game has evolved to reward skill and basketball IQ over just physicality. James Harden, meanwhile, took a slightly different approach. He leaned into the rule changes argument, explaining that modern players face more complex defensive challenges than players from previous decades. He talked about how zone defenses, switching schemes, and the emphasis on three-point shooting have created a chess match that didn't exist in the same way back then. Harden also brought up the conditioning aspect. He argued that modern players are better athletes because of advances in training, nutrition, and sports science. In his view, if you dropped a player from the 80s into today's game, they'd struggle to keep up with the pace and athleticism. But here's the thing. Neither LeBron nor Harden really addressed the core of Barkley's criticism. Chuck wasn't just arguing about who would win in a hypothetical matchup. He was talking about respect, about acknowledging the sacrifices and achievements of the players who came before them. And on that front, LeBron and Harden's responses felt like they were missing the point entirely. Fans noticed this disconnect immediately. Social media became even more divided. Team LeBron supporters praised him for standing his ground and speaking facts. They argued that truth shouldn't be sacrificed just to protect the feelings of retired players. If modern basketball is better, then it's better, period. But Team Barkley supporters saw LeBron and Harden's responses as arrogant and disrespectful. They felt like the modern superstars were benefiting from everything the old guard built while simultaneously dismissing their accomplishments. It was the ultimate display of ingratitude, and it left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths. Media personalities jumped into the fray, each offering their own take. Some sided with LeBron, arguing that athletes should be allowed to have opinions without being accused of disrespect. Others backed Barkley, saying that there's a way to discuss evolution without tearing down the past. The controversy wasn't dying down, it was escalating, and everyone wondered, where does this end? Chapter 4. The real issue behind the beef. Let's take a step back and look at what's really happening here, because this controversy goes way deeper than just basketball debates. At its core, this is about legacy, respect, and how we value the contributions of those who came before us. LeBron James is currently in the final stages of his career, and he's obsessed with his legacy. He wants to be remembered as the greatest player of all time. And part of that conversation requires comparing himself to legends like Michael Jordan, Magic Johnson, and others. But here's the tricky part. If you elevate the modern era too much, you risk diminishing the accomplishments of the past. And if those accomplishments don't hold as much weight, then beating them in statistical comparisons doesn't mean as much. This creates a weird paradox for LeBron. He needs the old guard to be seen as legitimate competition so that surpassing them means something. But at the same time, his comments suggest that the modern game is so superior that past players wouldn't even be relevant today. You can't have it both ways. James Harden, meanwhile, is dealing with his own legacy questions. He's been criticized throughout his career for his playing style, his playoff performances, and his inability to win a championship as the primary star. By arguing that the modern game is more difficult and complex, Harden is essentially defending himself and his generation against critics who compare him unfavorably to past players. But here's what makes Barkley's position so powerful. He's not saying modern players aren't great. He's saying they lack the respect and humility that should come with following in the footsteps of giants. You can believe you're great without diminishing those who came before you. You can acknowledge evolution without disrespect history. This controversy also sets a dangerous precedent for future generations. If today's superstars can casually dismiss the accomplishments of yesterday's legends, what happens when the next generation does the same to LeBron and Harden? Will they appreciate being told that they wouldn't be able to compete in the future? Will they enjoy hearing that their era was easier compared to what comes next? Probably not. And that's exactly Barkley's point. The old guard isn't asking for modern players to pretend that the game hasn't evolved. They're asking for acknowledgement, for gratitude, for a simple recognition that their sacrifices and achievements laid the foundation for everything that exists today. Is that really too much to ask? Apparently, for some, it is. And that's what makes this controversy so fascinating and frustrating at the same time. Chapter 5. Where this leaves everyone. So where are we now? As of early 2025, this controversy is still unresolved, and honestly, it probably won't ever be fully resolved. Generational debates in sports are eternal, and everyone involved has too much pride to back down completely. Charles Barkley has cemented his reputation as someone who will always tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. He's become the voice of the old guard, the person who's willing to call out disrespect when he sees it. For many fans, especially those who grew up watching 80s and 90s basketball, Chuck is a hero right now. He said what they were all thinking, and he didn't care about the backlash. But this also puts Barkley in an interesting position. He's now firmly established as someone from the old era, which means younger fans might dismiss his opinions as outdated or biased. He risks becoming the cranky old man yelling about how things were better back in his day, even though his criticisms are actually pretty valid. LeBron James, meanwhile, faces a more complicated situation. He's trying to finish his career on top, to solidify his legacy as the GOAT, and to be remembered as someone who elevated the game. But this controversy has revealed a potential weakness in his legacy argument. If he's too dismissive of past eras, he might alienate the very people whose respect he needs to be considered the greatest ever. Think about it. Michael Jordan's legacy is protected by an entire generation of fans and players who witnessed his greatness and refused to let it be diminished. If LeBron doesn't build that same coalition of supporters by respecting those who came before him, his legacy might not have the same staying power. Future generations might look back and say, yeah, he was great, but he didn't respect the history of the game. And that's a stain that's hard to remove. James Harden's legacy is less certain, but this controversy doesn't help him. He's already fighting against narratives about his playoff performances and his playing style. Adding disrespectful to legends to that list isn't going to win him any new supporters. If anything, it gives his critics more ammunition. The fans, as always, remain divided. Some believe that truth and honesty should come before politeness, that LeBron and Harden